You think you're a hero, Johnson? Slater's voice, slick with grease and cheap authority, cut through the kitchen's clatter. You're not a hero? You're just unemployed. He threw the small, folded wad of cash onto the prep counter. It was her final pay, short $75. I told you this isn't a charity. Now get your things and get out. Talia's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a vibrating, helpless rage. She had just spent her last dollar, the money for her mother's prescription, on a meal for 2 strangers. And now she had nothing. The smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaning solution was the first thing that hit Talia Johnson every afternoon, and the last thing she scrubbed from under her nails at night. At 17, she was a senior by day at a magnet school she commuted an hour to reach, and a waitress by night at the Sweet Auburn Diner. The diner clung to the edges of Atlanta's old Fourth Ward like a barnacle, a relic of formica and fluorescence resisting the tide of glossy condos and juice bars. Its claim to fame, painted on the fogged-up front window, was its historic grit. As far as Talia could tell, that was just a polite term for linoleum floors that were permanently sticky, no matter how many times she mopped them. Talia wasn't working for grit. She was working for rent. The grit was just something she had to endure. She slid a heavy plate of hash browns, extra crispy, just how he liked them, and 2 eggs, over easy, runny, onto the counter for a regular, forcing a smile that made her cheeks ache. Here you go, Mr. Henderson. You're a ray of sunshine, Talia, he mumbled, not looking up from his paper. This wasn't the Mr. Henderson of her story. This one was a 40-something construction foreman who smelled of sawdust and diesel, and who tipped exactly 10%, rain or shine. He was predictable, which was the only thing Talia liked about him. Talia's real focus, the thing that sat like a stone in her stomach, was the pink slip of paper folded in her backpack, tucked beneath her dog-eared algebra textbook. It wasn't a grade. It was an eviction notice. It had been taped to their apartment door 3 days ago, the fluorescent pink paper screaming their failure to the entire hallway. Final notice to vacate. Her mother, Denise, had seen it first. Talia had come home from school to find her sitting on the steps, not crying, but just still, staring at the paper in her hand. Then the coughing started. A dry, rattling sound that had become the soundtrack to their poverty. The sickness, a persistent, debilitating bronchitis that doctors waved off as needing rest, had taken her mother's cleaning job, and Talia's diner wages were all that stood between them and a room at a shelter. Johnson, Table 4 needs water, Table 7 needs the check, and stop flirting with the regulars, barked Mr. Slater, the night manager. Mr. Slater was a man who seemed to be perpetually sweating, small beads of it gathering on his upper lip beneath a sparse, greasy mustache. He ruled his small, fluorescent-lit kingdom with a petty tyranny that Talia found exhausting. He was a clipboard tyrant, a man who found joy in docking pay for a broken glass, $2.50, or a minute-late clock-in, $5.00. He particularly seemed to enjoy needling Talia, her quiet competence, her straight-A studentness, her infuriating habit of never ever talking back. He seemed to take it all as a personal affront. Talia just nodded, her smile tightening until she felt the muscle jump in her jaw. Yes, Mr. Slater. She grabbed the heavy plastic water pitcher, the weight of it pulling on her already aching shoulder. She moved through the tables, a silent ghost in a maroon apron that smelled faintly of fryer oil. She refilled waters, took orders, wiped up a smear of ketchup, all while a complex equation ran through her head. Paycheck, $412. Tips this week, maybe $150 if I'm lucky. Rent, $950. Prescription refill, $88. Deficit, $306. Days until the 1st, 4. The math didn't work. It never did. She felt like she was trying to build a bridge out of spider webs. She was saving for college, theoretically. She had a pristine 4.0 GPA, a letter of acceptance to Georgia State, and a scholarship that covered tuition, but not the cost of living. Right now, the cost of living, rent, food, medicine, the bus pass, felt impossibly, suffocatingly high. Her dream of studying law, of becoming someone who could fight back against pink notices and predatory managers, felt like a distant, glittering mirage. It wasn't just a way out anymore. It was personal. She had a searing hot memory of being 10 years old, watching her father try to explain a contract dispute to a lawyer who charged by the minute. Her father had walked away, defeated, and 2 months later, he was gone. Talia wasn't just going to be a lawyer. She was going to be the one her father couldn't afford. "Hey, Talia." It was Jess, the cook, leaning through the pass-through window, spatula in hand. Jess was in her late 20s, with a sleeve of tattoos and a perpetually weary look. "You okay? You look like you're about to cry or punch someone, or both." Talia leaned against the stainless steel counter, the momentary respite a guilty luxury. Slater hated server-cook fraternization. "Just tired, Jess. Slater's on a warpath tonight. He's just mad his manager's special, which is just yesterday's meatloaf, isn't selling," Jess muttered. She slid a small, slightly too brown muffin onto the shelf. "This one, fell on the floor, and its wrapper. Gotta toss it." She winked, pushing it toward Talia. Talia pocketed the muffin, a lump forming in her throat. "Thanks, Jess." "Don't let him get to you," Jess said, her voice low. "You're too smart for this place. I mean it." "Too smart and too broke," Talia muttered, pushing off the counter, the small weight of the muffin in her pocket a pathetic comfort. "In this neighborhood, it's the same thing." She turned back to the dining room, her section now including a new table in the corner by the rattling air conditioner. An old couple. They had seated themselves, which was a technical violation of Slater's hostess must seat policy, a policy he was currently ignoring as he timed the hostess's bathroom break on his phone's stopwatch. Talia sighed, plastered on her diner smile, and grabbed 2 menus. The weight of the eviction notice in her bag felt heavier than the water pitcher. 4 days. She needed a miracle, and she was fresh out. She just had to get through this shift, get her tips, and hope it was enough to buy her mother's prescription and a box of pasta. It was a flimsy shield against the coming storm, but it was the only one she had. They were almost invisible. That was Talia's first thought as she approached the corner booth. In a diner filled with the boisterous laughter of college students and the clatter of cutlery from weary construction workers, the old couple seemed to exist in a small pocket of silence. They had shrunk, not in size, but in presence, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. The man, who she guessed was in his late 70s, wore a tweed blazer. It wasn't just clean, it was pressed. But the elbows were worn so thin, the fabric had a near-transparent sheen. His white hair was neatly combed, and his hands, though spotted with age, rested on the formica tabletop with a sort of resigned stillness. The woman beside him was smaller, with a cloud of silver hair and a pale blue cardigan pulled tight, as if she were perpetually cold. Talia noticed a tiny, meticulous repair near the cuff, stitched with thread that was almost the same color. She was studying the menu with an intensity that Talia usually only saw during final exams, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Welcome to the Sweet Auburn Diner. Can I start you folks off with some drinks?" Talia asked, her voice automatically shifting into its customer service cadence. Bright, clear, and entirely fake. The man looked up, and his eyes were a startlingly clear blue, magnified by thick glasses. They were, Talia noticed, the eyes of someone who had been handsome once and was still proud. "Oh, yes. Thank you, dear," I think just 2 waters for now. With lemon, if you have it. And maybe a coffee for my wife." "No, Mark. Just water is fine," the woman said softly, her voice a papery rustle. She didn't look up from the menu, her finger still tracing the prices. "The coffee might keep me awake." "Eleanor, it's 6 p.m., he said, his tone gentle, laced with an old, familiar frustration. "A little coffee won't hurt." "The water is fine, Mark," she repeated, finally looking at Talia. Her smile was brittle, a fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just 2 waters, please. We're just deciding." Talia nodded. "No problem. I'll be right back with those." She retrieved the waters, her mind already back on the eviction math. "Maybe if I ask for an advance." Slater would laugh in my face. Then he'd probably write me up for financial irresponsibility. She returned to the booth. The couple was now in a quiet, tense discussion, their heads bent together over the single menu they shared. "Told you we should have gone to the grocery store, Mark. I had a can of minestrone and bread. We would have been fine." "And I told you I will not have you eating canned soup on our 53rd anniversary," he whispered back, his voice fierce but shaky. We are not there yet. We should be able to have one hot meal, one decent meal." 53rd anniversary. Talia felt a sharp, painful pang of recognition. It was the same argument her parents used to have, back when her father was still around. The same hushed, desperate debate over necessity versus dignity. 53 years. Her parents hadn't made it to 15. This couple, who had weathered more than half a century together, were being defeated by a diner menu. She cleared her throat softly. "Ready to order, folks?" The man, Mark, startled. "Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My wife will have the grilled cheese and a cup of tomato soup." He pointed to the $8.99 combo. "And I will have the same." "A fine choice. Our soup is homemade," Talia lied, and she hated herself for it. It came from a large, industrial-sized can, and Jess just added extra pepper and a dash of cream to make it gourmet. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor said, giving Talia that same fragile smile. "That sounds lovely." As Talia walked away, she heard Mark whisper, "It's fine, Ellie. Everything is fine." Talia put the order in, her stomach twisting. They reminded her of her grandparents, who had passed away before she could really know them. There was a quiet dignity to them that felt out of place in Slater's fluorescent palace. For the next hour, she kept an eye on them. They didn't talk much. They ate slowly, meticulously. Eleanor ate all of her soup, but only half of her sandwich, cutting it into tiny, bite-sized pieces. Mark ate all of his, then, neatly, without a trace of shame, wrapped his wife's other half in a napkin and tucked it into his jacket pocket. They spoke little, but their hands often found each other across the table, a brief, reassuring touch that spoke volumes. Talia refilled their waters, consciously avoiding Slater's glare. He hated when she spent too much time at a table. "More profit and turnover, Johnson," he'd drill. But she couldn't help it. She lingered, giving them a real smile this time. "How was everything?" "It was lovely, dear, truly," Eleanor said, and she seemed to mean it. "The soup was perfect. You've been so kind." "It's my pleasure." Talia dropped the check, a small slip of green paper totaling $19.06 with tax. She saw Mark's hand go to his wallet, a slow, practiced motion. She turned away, giving them privacy, heading to bus a table of students who had left a disaster of crumpled napkins and spilled soda. She was wiping down the sticky mess when she heard Slater's voice, suddenly loud and sharp, cutting through the diner's hum. "What do you mean? Declined?" The diner, which had been buzzing with a dozen different conversations, seemed to fall silent in an instant. Even the sizzle from the grill felt muted. Talia's head snapped up, a cold dread washing over her. Slater was standing at the Hendersons' booth. He was holding the small green check and Mark's debit card, holding the card between two fingers as if it were contaminated. Mark looked bewildered, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. I don't understand. There must be a mistake. That's our bank debit card. Could you please try it again? Already did, twice, Slater said, tapping the card on the table with an impatient thwack, thwack, thwack. It's declined. Insufficient funds. That means empty. Busted. No money. He didn't just say it. He announced it. His voice was pitched to carry, to make an example. The tables nearby, the college students, the construction workers, all looked over. One of the students, a guy in a frat sweatshirt, snickered and raised his phone, as if to film. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and swimming with a bright, sudden shame. "Oh, Mark, the Social Security. It wasn't deposited. I checked this morning, but I thought—" "That can't be," Mark whispered, his voice shaking. He was fumbling with his wallet, a worn black leather thing that was mostly empty. He pulled out a few dollar bills, a 5 and 3 ones. $8. I seem to be short. I'm so sorry. I can come back tomorrow. I promise. I'll come back and pay. Or I can write you a check. Slater let out a short, bark-like laugh. "Oh, you'll come back tomorrow. That's a new one. I've heard 'em all, old man. And we haven't taken checks since 2005. Pops? What's next? You want to barter with that tweed jacket? You think this is a soup kitchen? We don't run a charity here. Sir, please," Talia said, rushing over, her tray of dirty glasses forgotten. "It's okay. It's just a mistake." "Stay out of this, Johnson," Slater snapped, not even looking at her. He pointed a stubby finger at Mark. "Look, Pops, it's simple. You ate the food, you pay for the food. Or I call the police. Your choice." "The police?" Eleanor's voice was a thin wail. "Oh no, please, Mark, do something. Sir, please, don't call the police." The old man was trembling now, a mixture of rage and humiliation. He was trying to stand up, but his legs seemed to be failing him. He gripped the table to steady himself. "Sir, I am not a thief. This is a misunderstanding. We can wash dishes. My wife and I will wash the dishes." Slater actually recoiled in disgust. "Are you insane? I'm not letting you too near my kitchen. You're probably covered in whatever. That's it." He pulled his phone from his belt clip. Yeah. Theft of services. I'm calling it in." This was it. This was the moment. Talia's heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. She saw Slater's smug, cruel face. She saw the student who was now definitely filming. She saw the other customers, some watching with pity, others with a detached, zoo-like curiosity. And she saw the Hendersons, a proud old couple who had shared 53 years, being utterly dismantled, stripped of their dignity over a $19 check. She saw her own mother in Eleanor's face, the same terror of falling, of not being able to get back up. The math in her head, the one about the rent and the prescription, suddenly vanished. It was replaced by a different kind of calculation. A human one. "Don't do it! Don't! You need this job. You need this job, Talia. It's not your problem." But then she saw Eleanor's hand, the one with the simple, worn gold band, trembling so hard it rattled the water glass. And she couldn't not act. She stepped between Slater and the table. "Mr. Slater, that won't be necessary." Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence with absolute authority. Slater turned, his face darkening. "I told you, Johnson. It's 1906, she said, looking right at him. "I'm paying for it." The silence that followed her words was total. The student put his phone down. The sizzle of the grill seemed to echo. Slater's jaw, which had been flapping with self-importance, snapped shut. Eleanor Henderson let out a small, choked sob. Mark just stared at Talia, his blue eyes wide with a disbelief that was more painful than his shame had been. "You're... what?" Slater finally managed, his voice dropping to a low, furious hiss. "I'm paying their bill," Talia repeated, louder this time. She walked past him to the POS terminal, her legs feeling strangely steady. Slater actually made a move to block her, but she sidestepped him as if he were just another obstacle. She fumbled for her apron pocket, her hand closing around the small, crumpled ball of her tips from the first half of her shift. She smoothed them out on the counter. A 10, 2 5s, 3 1s, and a handful of change. $23.41. It was the money for her mother's inhaler, the prescription she was supposed to pick up tomorrow morning. "Johnson, don't be stupid," Slater growled, following her. "That's your money. They're con artists. They play this old and sad routine everywhere." "They're not con artists," Talia said, her back to him. She grabbed the Hendersons' check from his hand. She punched in her own employee number. The system had a function for employee comp, 1 free meal per shift, up to a $10 value. Slater was the only one who used it for himself. Using it felt like a small, sharp betrayal of the company, but it was the only way to make the math work. She applied it to one of the grilled cheese combos. The total dropped to $10.07. She took the $10 bill and one of the ones from her tip pile. She fed them into the register, her hands shaking so badly she had to try twice. The machine whirred, accepted the payment, and spat out a paid receipt. She tore it off and walked back to the booth. Slater was standing there like a thundercloud, but he was, for the moment, silent. The other diners were openly staring. Mr. Henderson at the counter, the construction foreman, was watching her with a grim, unreadable expression. Talia handed the receipt to Mark. "It's all taken care of, sir. You have a wonderful evening." Mark looked at the receipt, then at Talia. He didn't take it. His hand was still trembling. We can't accept this, young lady. This is your money. I saw you from your pocket." "Please," Talia said, her voice softening. She pushed the receipt gently into his hand. "Sir, let someone help you. Just let this be a good thing. Pay it forward sometime, okay?" Eleanor was crying openly now, silent tears tracking down her wrinkled cheeks. She reached out and grabbed Talia's hand. Her skin was as thin as tissue paper, but her grip was surprisingly strong. You are an angel," she whispered, her voice thick. "A true angel. You don't know what you've done." "I'm just a waitress, ma'am." Talia squeezed her hand, then gently pulled away. She felt a burning in her own throat. "You all are free to go. Please, be safe." Mark finally nodded, his pride warring with a profound, overwhelming gratitude. He tucked the receipt into his pocket, the one where his wife's sandwich half already was. He stood, pulling himself up to his full, frail height, and helped Eleanor to her feet. They didn't look at Slater. They only looked at Talia. "God bless you, child," Mark said, his voice thick. And then they were gone, walking slowly out the door, the small bell above it tinkling softly in their wake. The moment the door closed, the diner's spell broke. The buzz of conversation returned, but it was different. Subdued. Mr. Henderson at the counter stood up, walked over to Talia, and pressed a folded $20 bill into her hand. "That was a good thing you did, kid," he said gruffly, then tossed a 10 on the counter for his own meal and left. Talia looked at the 20, then at Slater, who was already marching toward her, his face purple. "You are in so much trouble, Johnson," he hissed, grabbing the 20 from her hand. "This covers the rest of what you stole, plus the trouble you caused." That was a tip," Talia stammered. "That was a pity payment for your insubordination. Now get to the back and scrub the grout in the men's room. You're not waiting on any more tables tonight." The lightness she had felt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard dread. She had done the right thing. It had cost her, really cost her, and the price was still climbing. The next 2 hours were the longest of Talia's life. Slater was true to his word. He didn't fire her, not yet. He was saving that. Instead, he made her life a living hell, convinced she would quit first. He sent her to the men's room with a bucket of gray water and a single toothbrush-sized brush. "I want that grout white, Johnson. Not diner white. White. She scrubbed on her hands and knees, the smell of urine and cheap disinfectant burning her nose. Her back ached, and her knees were raw, but she didn't cry. She focused on the math. "I have $11.34 in my pocket. I have no job. Jess found her there when she came to use the staff restroom." "Talia? What in God's name are you—" "Oh, hell no. He did not." "He did," Talia said, her voice dull. She sat back on her heels, wiping a strand of sweaty hair from her face with her wrist. "Talia, what you did, that was— I've never seen anyone stand up to him." Jess's voice was low, urgent. "But you're in real trouble, kid. He's in the office, and he's on the phone with corporate, or at least he's pretending to be. He's making a case against you. Theft, insubordination, creating a hostile environment for management. He's pulling out all the stops." "He took my tip," Talia said numbly. "Mr. Henderson's 20. Jess's face hardened. I'm going to— "No, okay, look, just get through this. You're too good for this place anyway. Jess, I need this job." Talia's voice finally broke. "I'm going to be evicted." Jess's face fell. "Oh, kid." "Johnson, are you holding a prayer meeting in there?" Slater's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Get back to work." Talia finished the grout, bussed the remaining tables. Slater made a point of reassigning the hostess's work to her, and began her closing side work. The last table paid out at 10:50 p.m. Her body moved on autopilot. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow dread. The $11. $34 left in her pocket felt like a judgment. It wasn't enough for the prescription. It wasn't enough for anything. Slater had stayed in his cramped back office, the glass window dark. Talia almost allowed herself to hope he had forgotten, that he had just been posturing. At 11:02 p.m., she clocked out. The screen flashed her total hours for the week. She was about to grab her backpack when the office door creaked open. "Johnson, my office." Talia's stomach plummeted. She pushed the swinging kitchen door open, the whoosh sounding unnaturally loud. She walked back. Jess was gone, the grill scraped clean. She was alone. She stood in the doorway of Slater's office. It was a small, cluttered space that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. He was leaning back in his chair, feet on the desk, not even looking at her. He was studying a spreadsheet. "You know what that was, Johnson?" he asked the ceiling. "What was what, Mr. Slater?" He finally looked at her, his small, piggy eyes glinting under the bad fluorescent light. "That little stunt you pulled, with the old folks. You think you're better than me. You think you're better than this place. I see it. You and your books, your quiet little judgments. You think you're on your way to bigger things, but you're just like everyone else. Worse, even. Because you're not just stupid, you're arrogant. It was $19, Mr. Slater, and they needed help." "I don't care if they were on fire," he yelled, slamming his feet to the floor. The chair squealed in protest. "I run a business, a tight-margin business, and you, with your high and mighty honor roll crap, you think you can just give my product away? You cost me more than just $19, Johnson. You cost me authority. You made me look like a fool in my own diner. And that's expensive." Talia's rage, the one she'd been swallowing for months, suddenly flared. They were humiliated. You humiliated them. Over $19. What is wrong with you? Slater's face went dark. He had been enjoying his tirade, but her question hit a nerve. He stepped back and, with a visible effort, smoothed his greasy hair. His voice became dangerously calm. "You think you're a hero, Johnson?" he asked, his voice slick with grease and cheap authority. "You're not a hero, you're just unemployed." He reached into the cash drawer, pulled out a small folded wad of cash. "This is your pay for the last 2 days, minus the $19.06 you stole, minus the $20 fine for the tip you tried to steal from the register, and a $30 fine for insubordination, plus, let's see, a $5.94 fine for the employee comp you stole. We'll call it $75 for the lesson." He threw the folded cash onto the prep counter. It was her final pay, short $75. "I told you this isn't a charity. Now get your things and get out." Talia's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a vibrating, helpless rage. She looked at the money, then at his smug face. She had just spent her last dollar on a meal for 2 strangers, and now she had nothing. She didn't grab the money. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Keep it," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "You obviously need it more than I do." She turned, walked out of the office, through the kitchen, and out the back door, slamming it so hard the metal frame rattled. She didn't stop running until she was 2 blocks away, her breath tearing at her lungs, the hot, bitter tears of injustice finally falling. The pink eviction notice was waiting, and she had just been fired for an act of kindness. The math was no longer complicated. It was 0. Talia didn't sleep. She walked home, the route she'd taken 100 times. But tonight, the streets felt different, exposed, raw. Every shadow looked like a threat, every passing car a potential danger. The weight of the eviction notice in her bag felt like it was pulling her down, a physical, crushing weight. She sat on the fire escape of their apartment, the cool Atlanta night air doing nothing to soothe the hot panic in her chest. Below, the old 4th Ward was alive with sounds. A distant siren, music from a car, a couple arguing. It all felt a million miles away. She finally crept inside around 4 a.m. and fell into a shallow, dreamless sleep on the couch, fully clothed, her backpack still on. She replayed the scene. What could I have done? She could have said nothing. She could have let Slater call the police. She could have let that proud old couple be arrested for $19.06. Would that have been better? The answer was still no, but the cost was devastating. She woke to the sound of her mother's cough. It was a deep, racking sound that always ended in a desperate gasp for air. "Talia? Baby? You home?" Denise called from her bedroom. Talia sat up, her neck stiff. The apartment was dim, the morning light struggling to get through the grimy windows. The eviction notice was still on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. "I'm here, Mama." She went to the kitchen. Her mother emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a threadbare robe, her face pale and puffy. "You're late for school. Wait, why are you... Baby, what's wrong? You're wearing yesterday's clothes." Talia couldn't meet her eyes. I got fired, Mama." Denise's hand went to her mouth, the one she always used to stifle her cough. "Fired? From the diner?" "Oh, Talia. What? Why?" It's a long story. Mr. Slater is a..." Talia's voice broke. She couldn't do it. She couldn't add her failure to her mother's sickness. "I gave an old couple a free meal. They couldn't pay. He fired me for it." Denise's reaction was a painful, twisting conflict. Talia saw the pride in her eyes, warring with the sheer, naked terror. "Oh, Talia, how could you? After all No, you did. You did what you thought was right." She sat down heavily at the small kitchen table, the eviction notice right in front of her. She didn't seem to have the energy to cry. "The rent, the prescription." "I know, Mama, I know, I'll fix it." "How?" a voice screamed inside her. "How, Talia? You have no job, no money, and 4 days." A knock echoed through the small apartment. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was a sharp, official rap that sounded like judgment. Talia and her mother froze. They looked at each other, the same terror in their eyes. The landlord, the sheriff. "Don't answer it," Denise whispered, her hand gripping the edge of the table. "Maybe they'll think we already left." "Mama, they'll just come back, with a locksmith." Talia's heart was pounding. She took a deep breath, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. Her blood ran cold. It was a man in a suit, a dark, expensive-looking suit tailored to fit. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He was tall, black, and had an air of absolute, unassailable authority. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom, not in their crumbling apartment hallway. He smelled faintly of expensive cologne and leather. He was everything their apartment was not. "He's here," she thought, her mind racing. "He's the sheriff's deputy. He's here to serve the final papers, to put them out." "Who is it?" Denise whispered, terrified. The man knocked again, harder this time. Rap. Talia undid the chain, her hands slick with sweat. She opened the door. The man looked down at her. His face was stern, his eyes intelligent and searching. He was holding a briefcase in one hand and a large manila envelope in the other. "Talia Johnson?" he asked. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and precise, a voice used to commanding silence and respect. "Yes?" "My name is Judge Marcus Evans," he said. Talia's world shrank to the size of the doorframe. A judge. They weren't just being evicted, they were being sued. Maybe Slater was suing her for the money? Maybe the diner's owners were pressing charges? Her mother overheard from the kitchen. "A judge? Oh, Lord Jesus, have mercy. Sir, please. We just need more time. My daughter, she's a good girl. She's just trying to help me." Denise was on her feet, pleading, her voice cracking with desperation. The judge's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly as he looked past Talia to her mother. He held up a hand. "Ma'am, please. I'm not here about this." He nodded toward the pink notice on the table, which he'd clearly seen. "I am not a sheriff. I'm a civil court judge." Talia and Denise just stared, confused. "May I come in?" he asked. "I'm here about what happened yesterday, at the Sweet Auburn Diner." Talia stepped back, numb, and let the man into her living room. It was a tiny, cramped space, but Judge Evans entered it as if he were entering a boardroom, his presence filling the room. He took in the threadbare couch, the single bookshelf overflowing with Talia's schoolbooks, the stack of medical bills on the coffee table. He didn't gawk. He just observed. "Please," Talia gestured vaguely to the couch. "Thank you," he said, but he remained standing. Denise hovered in the kitchen doorway, clutching her robe. "Ma'am, would you mind getting me a glass of water?" It was a deliberate move. It broke the tension and forced a small human interaction. As Denise rushed to find their one good glass, Judge Evans's eyes fell on the eviction notice. He picked it up, his jaw tightening as he read the name of the predatory LLC that owned the building. I don't understand," Talia said, her voice barely a whisper. "You were at the diner?" "I was," Judge Evans said, setting the notice down as Denise handed him the water. He took a sip. At the counter, next to the foreman, Mr. Henderson. I often eat at the diners in my old district to keep a pulse on the community. He looked at Talia. I saw the whole thing, Ms. Johnson. Your manager's performance and your response. Talia's face burned with a new kind of shame. This powerful, important man had seen her get fired. He'd seen her lowest point. Mr. Slater, he has his rules, she muttered, defending a man she hated out of sheer, baffling reflex. The judge allowed himself a small, dry smile. His rules are idiotic, and likely illegal, but we'll get to that. He set his briefcase down and opened the manila envelope he was holding. I was moved by your actions, Ms. Johnson. You showed profound compassion and integrity in a situation where it would have been very easy to look the other way. I got fired for it, Talia said bitterly. You did, he agreed, his voice serious. And that is an injustice, but your act of kindness had ripples. The couple you helped, the Hendersons. They didn't know I was there. I paid my check and followed them out. I drove them home. Are they okay? Talia asked, her own problems momentarily forgotten. They are proud and deeply embarrassed. They're on a fixed income, and a bank error, which has since been corrected, wiped out their account for 24 hours. They were humiliated. And you were the only person who treated them with dignity. He paused. Mark and Eleanor they're friends of mine now. I spoke with them. I also made a few calls. He held out the envelope to Talia. This first is a gift from several of us. Talia opened it. Inside was a cashier's check. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely read the number. When she did, she gasped. $2,500. I can't, she stammered, trying to push it back. Sir, this is charity. I can't. Ms. Johnson, there is a profound difference between charity and solidarity, the judge said, his voice firm but not unkind. Charity is pity. Solidarity is respect. This money is not a handout. It is a back payment for services rendered to your community. The Hendersons insisted on contributing, now that their funds are back. Their name is on that check. Would you deny Mark and Eleanor the dignity of paying it forward, as you instructed? The rest is from concerned citizens. Consider it back pay for your integrity. Pay your rent, Ms. Johnson. Buy your mother her medicine. Denise was crying now, but for the first time in months they were tears of relief. Thank you, sir. God, thank you. That is not the primary reason I am here, Judge Evans continued, turning his full attention back to Talia. He handed her a business card. It was embossed, heavy stock. It read, The Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Judge Marcus Evans, Retiso, Director of Community Advocacy. You said you were a judge, Talia said, confused. I was. I retired from the bench 2 years ago. I found I could do more good on this side of the desk. We fight for people like you, people facing illegal evictions, people preyed on by that LLC. He tapped the pink notice. And people being cheated by their bosses. He tapped the card. I heard you want to be a lawyer. I saw you in action yesterday. You're a natural advocate. You're brave, you're smart, and you can't be intimidated. Frankly, you're exactly who I'm looking for. He smiled. A real, warm smile this time. I'm here to offer you a job, Ms. Johnson. An internship, at my office. You won't be getting coffee. You'll be on the front lines. I'm going to have you read the Atlanta Housing Code until you can recite it in your sleep. You're going to learn how to file a motion for discovery. You're going to hate it for the first month, and then you're going to love it. It pays $15 an hour, plus full benefits for you and your mother. We start Monday. Talia was speechless. The world had tilted, spun around, and reassembled itself in a way she could not comprehend. A job. A real job. A career. A way out. Yes, she finally breathed. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Talia was smiling, a real wide smile that reached her eyes. Her mother was hugging her. It was a perfect, movie-like ending. But as the judge picked up his briefcase, Talia's brow furrowed. "What about Mr. Slater?" she asked. The judge paused, his hand on the doorknob. His smile faded, replaced by that stern, judicial expression. "Ah, yes, Mr. Slater. That," he said, "is the other part of my visit." He turned back. "You see, Ms. Johnson, I am a man who believes in systems. And when a system is corrupt, you don't just patch the leak. You replace the whole pipe. Mr. Slater is not just a cruel man, he's a thief. And he was stupid enough to be cruel in front of a retired judge who specializes in employment law." Talia's eyes widened. "I invested in that franchise 10 years ago," he said, his voice flat. "Because the Sweet Auburn name means something to this city. It was a stop for civil rights leaders. It was a place for everyone. Men like Slater, they don't just poison a business. They poison a legacy. I rarely check in. But last night, I was concerned. You own it? I am a silent partner. But my voice is not silent." He continued. "When you took the Hendersons' check to the Pios, you rang in your employee discount. I saw that, and then you paid the rest in cash, your tips, and then, at the end of your shift, he fired you. And," the judge's voice went cold, "he told you he was docking your pay, $75. I know this because I was not the only person who saw what happened. I have a new client. Her name is Jess. She's a cook." Talia gasped. "Jess." "She was cleaning the grill, but she heard every word. She's been wanting to quit for months. She has a ledger, a small notebook. For 2 years, she's written down every time Slater fined someone, every broken glass fee, every uniform violation. She has dates, names, and amounts. She just never had the proof or the courage. Your firing," she said, "was the last straw." She called me this morning. She found my card in an old stack of Know Your Rights pamphlets someone left in the break room. She's not just a witness, Ms. Johnson. She's the chief prosecutor." The judge's face was grim. "What Mr. Slater did to you is called wage theft. It's illegal. Docking pay without a written agreement is illegal. Stealing your tip is illegal. Firing you in retaliation for, well, it's a gray area, but his other practices are not." "I made a call to the health department. A friend, a lovely woman named Mrs. Davis who hates managers who bully their staff. I mentioned I'd seen a few roaches near the ice machine. And I mentioned the precise temperature of the walk-in, which I happened to see when Slater left the door open. They are conducting a surprise inspection. Right, about now." He checked his watch. "I made a call to the Georgia Department of Labor," he continued, his voice like ice. "I forwarded them Jess's testimony and my own. They are seizing the payroll records as we speak, for a full audit." "And finally," he said, "I called the majority owner, my old golf partner. He was furious, not because of the Hendersons, I'm afraid, but because, as I put it, Slater's incompetence is about to cost you 7 figures in a class action lawsuit for wage theft. That got his attention. He's flying in from Augusta tonight." He snapped the briefcase shut. "Hard karma, Ms. Johnson, is not a lightning bolt from the sky. It's a series of well-placed, systematic, and legally binding phone calls. Mr. Slater is not just fired. He is being investigated for felony wage theft. The franchise is being shut down for a week for deep cleaning and retraining. And when it reopens, Jess will be the new kitchen manager, with a 30% raise and full benefits, retroactive. As per my suggestion." 3 weeks later, the Sweet Auburn diner was still dark, a closed for remodeling sign taped to the door. Talia, however, was thriving. She wore a crisp, new-to-her blazer she'd found at a thrift store, and she sat at a real desk, one made of polished wood, not sticky formica. The offices of the Atlanta Legal Aid Society were bright, clean, and smelled of old books and fresh coffee. She was a natural. The judge had been right. She was quick, empathetic, and utterly fearless. The other lawyers, who had first seen a kid, now saw a colleague. She was sitting in on a client intake with a senior attorney. The client was a woman just like her mother, living in the same complex, being evicted by the same LLC. The woman was crying, saying they were evicting her for noise complaints. Talia listened, then leaned over and whispered to the senior attorney, "Ask her if her air conditioning is working. Check for mold violations. Section 8, Housing Code 55-2. They haven't replaced the filters in that building in at least 2 years. They're evicting her because she complained about the mold." The attorney's eyes went wide. Talia was on her way to the file room, her arms full of case briefs, when the receptionist called her. "Talia, can you take this gentleman's info? He seems agitated, and he's asking for a judge, but he doesn't have an appointment." Talia walked to the front, pulling a fresh intake form from the wall. "I can take his initial information, ma'am," she said. A man was sitting in one of the plastic chairs, his head in his hands. He was wearing a stained t-shirt, and he smelled of stale cigarettes, defeat, and cheap liquor. He looked up as she approached, his eyes meeting hers. It was Slater. Talia stopped. The files in her arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He looked broken, smaller. The greasy, puffed-up authority was gone, hollowed out. He was just a man, a terrified, dirty, and desperate man. His eyes widened in recognition, and then, horrifyingly, they filled with a desperate, pleading hope. "Johnson?" he whispered, half standing. "Talia? You work here?" Talia just looked at him. The rage she had felt, the humiliation, the desire for revenge. It was all gone. She just felt a profound, weary sadness. You gotta help me," he stammered, taking a step toward her. He was shaking. They took everything. The audits. They're saying I owe back taxes, penalties. They froze my accounts. My car got repossessed. I'm going to be homeless, Talia. I got a kid. You didn't know that. I got a kid. I was just doing what they told me to do. Keep margins tight, they said. Cut costs. I was just doing my job. This judge, he's a monster. He's ruined me. You were nice. You're a good kid. Tell him to call it off. Please. He was a man drowning, grasping at the very person he had thrown overboard. Talia looked at him, at his sweaty, terrified face. She saw the Hendersons in him. She saw her own mother in him. She saw the same raw panic of someone who had hit the bottom and was still falling. And that's what terrified her. The cycle, the desperation. But the judge's words echoed in her mind. The difference between charity and solidarity. Slater wasn't asking for solidarity. He was asking for a handout. He was asking for her to undo the consequences of his actions. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She placed the intake form on the clipboard and handed it to him, along with a pen. He looked at it, confused. What's this?" "That's an intake form," she said, her voice calm and professional. "If you believe you've been a victim of illegal employment practices, or if you're facing homelessness, you can fill it out. A paralegal will be with you shortly to see if you qualify for our services." She didn't save him. She didn't condemn him. She made him subject to the system. The very system she was now a part of. He just stared at her. You're not gonna help me?" "I am helping you, Mr. Slater," she said, her voice even. "This is how it works." Then she turned and walked away, the sound of her new, sensible shoes clicking purposefully on the polished floor, leaving him to wait his turn. Talia never looked back. She learned that day that true power wasn't in the act of revenge, but in the quiet, steady ability to build a new life from the wreckage of the old. Karma, she realized, wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance. Slater had built his world on a foundation of petty cruelty, and it had collapsed under its own weight. Talia had built hers on a single, costly act of compassion, and she was now, brick by brick, constructing a future. The scales had not just been balanced, they had been reset. And in the hushed, powerful halls of the law, Talia Johnson was finally, and truly, on her way up.